The Philistines gathered their armies for war. They stood on one mountain. The Israelites gathered their army. They stood on the opposite mountain. A valley was between them. The Philistines had a champion fighter. His name was Goliath. He was from the city of Gath. He was very tall. He was 6 cubits and a span tall. He wore bronze armor on his body. The weight of his armor was heavy. He had bronze protection on his legs. He carried a large bronze spear. Goliath stood in the valley. He shouted to the army of Israel. He said, "Why do you come out and stand in battle lines? I am a Philistine. You are servants of Saul. Choose one man for yourselves. Let him come down and fight me. If he can fight and kill me, then we will become your servants. But if I defeat him and kill him, then you will become our servants." Goliath said, "I challenge the army of Israel today. Send me a man, and we will fight." When King Saul and all the Israelites heard these words, they were greatly afraid. They were troubled by Goliath. There was a man named Jesse. He lived in Bethlehem in Judah. He was an old man. He had 8 sons. Jesse's 3 oldest sons followed King Saul to the war. Their names were Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah. David was the youngest son of Jesse. David went back and forth from Saul's side. He returned to Bethlehem to care for his father's sheep. For 40 days, Goliath came forward. He stood in the valley, morning and evening. One day, Jesse spoke to his son David. Jesse said, "Take this roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread. Hurry, take them to your brothers in the camp. Also, take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their group. Go and see how your brothers are doing. Bring back some news from them." David woke up early the next morning. He left the sheep with another shepherd. He took the supplies and went to the camp, as Jesse commanded him. David arrived at the camp. The army was preparing for battle. The soldiers shouted the battle cry. Israel and the Philistines stood opposite each other. David left his supplies with the keeper of the equipment. He ran to the battle line to greet his brothers. David was talking with them. Then Goliath, the champion, came out of the Philistine line. Goliath repeated his usual challenge. David heard the challenge. All the men of Israel saw Goliath. They were terrified. They ran away from him. The men said to David, "Do you see this man? He comes to challenge Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. The king will also give him his daughter in marriage. He will make his father's family free from taxes in Israel." David asked the men who stood near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine? What will be done for the man who removes this shame from Israel? Who is this Philistine? He is an uncircumcised man. Why does he insult the armies of the living God?" The soldiers repeated the promise. They said, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking with the men. Eliab became very angry with David. Eliab said, "Why did you come down here? Who did you leave the few sheep with in the desert? I know your pride and the evil in your heart. You came down only to watch the battle." David answered, "What have I done now? I only asked a question." David turned away from his brother. He asked the same question to other men. They gave him the same answer. Some men heard David's words. They told King Saul about them. Saul sent for David. David stood before Saul. David said, "Let no one's heart fail because of this Philistine. I will go and fight him." Saul looked at David. Saul said, "You are not able to go against this Philistine. You cannot fight him. You are only a young boy. Goliath has been a man of war since he was young." David said to Saul, "I watch my father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came, it took a lamb from the flock. I went after the animal. I struck it and saved the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turned against me, I caught it by the jaw. I struck it and killed it. I have killed both the lion and the bear." David continued, "This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of those animals. He insulted the armies of the living God. The Lord saved me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear. He will also save me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul finally agreed. Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Saul dressed David in his own armor. Saul put a bronze helmet on David's head. Saul put his coat of armor on David. David tied Saul's sword over the armor. David tried to walk in the heavy armor. He was not used to walking in it. David said to Saul, "I cannot go with these things. I am not used to them," he said. David took the armor off. David took his shepherd's staff in his hand. He went down to the stream nearby. He chose 5 smooth stones from the water. He put the stones carefully into his shepherd's bag. He kept his sling ready in his hand. David started to move toward the Philistine. The Philistine walked nearer and nearer to David. The man who carried Goliath's shield walked before him. Goliath looked closely at David. He saw that David was just a youth. David was only a boy. David was handsome and healthy. Goliath felt contempt for David. Goliath said to David, "Am I a dog? Why do you come to me with sticks?" Goliath cursed David by the names of his gods. Goliath spoke harshly to David. "Come here to me," Goliath demanded. "I will feed your body to the birds of the air. I will give your flesh to the wild animals." David spoke back to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword." David said, "You come with a spear and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts. He is the God of the armies of Israel. You have insulted him greatly." David declared, "The Lord will deliver you into my hand today. I will strike you down. I will cut off your head. I will give the bodies of the Philistine army to the birds. I will give them to the wild animals of the earth. Then all the world will know that Israel has a God. All these people standing here will know that the Lord saves people. He does not need a sword or a spear to save. The battle belongs only to the Lord. He will give all of you into our hands." When Goliath started to move toward David, David ran quickly. David rushed to meet Goliath on the battle line. David put his hand into his shepherd's bag. He quickly took out one stone. He put the stone into his sling. He swung the sling powerfully. He shot the stone directly at Goliath. The stone hit the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank deep into his forehead. Goliath fell forward onto the ground. He fell face down. David defeated the Philistine with only a sling and a stone. David struck the Philistine down and killed him. David did not have a sword in his hand. David ran and stood over the huge Philistine. He grabbed Goliath's own sword. He pulled the long sword out of its sheath. David killed Goliath completely. He cut off Goliath's head. The Philistines saw that their mighty hero was dead. They turned and ran away in fear. The men of Israel and Judah stood up. They shouted loudly. They chased the Philistines away. They pursued them all the way to Gath. They chased them to the gates of Ekron. Dead Philistine soldiers lay on the road. They covered the path all the way to Gath and Ekron. The Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines. They took everything of value from the Philistine camp. David took the head of the Philistine. He brought it to the city of Jerusalem. He put Goliath's weapons inside his own tent. King Saul looked at David. David was returning from killing the large Philistine. Saul spoke to Abner. Abner was the commander of the army. Saul asked, "Abner, whose son is this young man?" Abner replied, "My lord, O king, I do not know." Saul commanded Abner, "Go and find out whose son this boy is." David stood before Saul. David held the Philistine's head in his hand. Saul asked him, "Young man, whose son are you?" David answered the king, "I am the son of your servant Jesse. Jesse lives in Bethlehem." David finished speaking with Saul. Jonathan, Saul's son, was listening closely. Jonathan felt a strong bond with David. Jonathan loved David immediately. He loved him as he loved his own soul. Saul kept David with him that day. Saul did not let David return to his father's house. Jonathan made an agreement with David. They promised to be loyal friends forever. Jonathan honored David. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing. He gave the expensive robe to David. He also gave David his armor. He gave David his sword. He gave him his bow. He gave him his belt. David went out often. He did every task that Saul gave him. David was very successful in his tasks. Saul put David in charge of the men of war. This pleased all the people. Saul's servants also accepted David's command. The army returned home. David returned after killing the Philistine. The women came out from all the cities of Israel. They came to meet King Saul. They sang happy songs. They danced with tambourines. They shouted for joy. The women sang as they played their instruments. They answered each other with a song. The women sang, "Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands." These words made Saul very angry. The song greatly displeased him. He thought, "They give David credit for tens of thousands. They only give me credit for thousands. What more can David get now? They will soon give him the kingdom too." Saul felt suspicious of David from that day forward. The next day, an evil spirit came upon Saul. The spirit was from God. Saul behaved like a crazy man inside his house. David played the harp for Saul. He played music every day, as he had done before. Saul held a spear in his hand. Saul suddenly threw the spear at David. Saul thought, "I will pin David to the wall." David dodged the spear quickly. He moved away from Saul 2 times. Saul was afraid of David. He feared David because the Lord was with David. The Lord had left King Saul. Saul decided to remove David from his personal service. Saul sent David away. Saul made David a commander over 1,000 men. David led the soldiers out to battle. He brought them back safely. David acted wisely in all his ways. The Lord was with David in everything he did. Saul saw that David was very successful. Saul feared David even more. All the people of Israel and Judah loved David. They loved him because he successfully led them in battle. Saul spoke to David, "Here is my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as your wife. You must serve me bravely. You must fight the Lord's battles." Saul thought, "I will not kill David myself. Let the Philistines kill him instead." David answered Saul, "Who am I, and what is my family? Who are my relatives in Israel? I am not worthy to be the king's son-in-law." The time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to marry David. But Saul gave her to Adriel, the Maholathite, instead. Saul had another daughter named Michal. Michal loved David very much. Saul heard about this love. The news pleased Saul. Saul thought, I will use Michal to trap David. I will give her to him, but the Philistines will kill him. Saul said to David, You shall be my son-in-law today. Saul commanded his servants, Speak to David secretly. Tell him, The king likes you. All his servants love you. You should become the king's son-in-law. Saul's servants spoke these words to David. David answered, Is it easy to become the king's son-in-law? I am a poor man. I am not respected. The servants reported David's words to Saul. Saul said, Tell David this, the king does not want a marriage gift of silver or gold. The king only wants 100 foreskins of the Philistines. This is to take revenge on the king's enemies. Saul intended that David should fall by the hand of the Philistines. The servants told David Saul's message. David was pleased with the offer. He was happy to become the king's son-in-law. David did not wait for the time to expire. David stood up and went with his men. He killed 200 men of the Philistines. David brought their foreskins to Saul. He gave the full number to the king. He wanted to become the king's son-in-law. Saul then gave his daughter, Michal, to David as a wife. Saul knew surely that the Lord was with David. Saul also saw that his daughter, Michal, loved David. Saul became even more afraid of David. Saul became David's enemy permanently. He hated David every day. The Philistine leaders kept coming out to fight. Every time they came out, David was more successful than Saul's other officers. David's name became very famous. Saul spoke to his son, Jonathan. Saul also spoke to all his servants. He told them to kill David. Saul's hatred was now total. Jonathan loved David very much. Jonathan heard his father's evil plan. Jonathan was very sad. Jonathan warned David immediately. Jonathan said, My father Saul seeks to kill you. Jonathan said, Be careful tomorrow morning. Jonathan advised David, Go and hide yourself. Jonathan said, Stay in a secret place. Jonathan planned to go to the field. He planned to stand near his father. He wanted to speak to Saul about David. He hoped to find out Saul's true intentions. Jonathan went out to the field. Saul came to the field. Jonathan spoke good words about David. Jonathan said, O king, do not sin against David. Jonathan reminded Saul of David's great service. David did not harm the king. David helped the nation. David fought the Philistine. David killed Goliath. The Lord gave a great victory to Israel. You were happy when this happened. Why do you want to kill an innocent man now? Why should you shed innocent blood? David has only served you well. Saul listened to Jonathan's words. Saul was persuaded by his son. Saul swore an oath by the Lord. Saul said, As the Lord lives, David shall not be killed. Jonathan was relieved. Jonathan called David out of hiding. Jonathan brought David to Saul. David lived in Saul's presence again. War started again between Israel and the Philistines. David went out to fight the enemy. David defeated the Philistines heavily. He achieved more victories than Saul's other officers. David's success made Saul angry again. The bad spirit from the Lord came upon Saul. Saul was sitting in his house. Saul held his spear in his hand. David was playing music for Saul. David played the harp to soothe the king. Saul felt his jealousy return strongly. Saul wanted David dead immediately. Saul threw the spear at David. He intended to pin David to the wall. David quickly moved away. The spear missed David. The spear struck the wall. David escaped from Saul. David ran away that night. Saul immediately sent messengers to David's house. Saul commanded them to watch the house. Saul ordered them to kill David in the morning. Michal was David's wife. Michal knew her father's plan. Michal warned David. She said, "You must save your life tonight." She said, "If you stay, you will be killed tomorrow." Michal helped David escape. She lowered David down through a window. David ran away and escaped. The messengers stayed at the door. They guarded the house all night. When morning came, the messengers demanded David. Michal told them, "David is ill." Michal said, "He is lying in his bed now." Michal pretended David was sick. The messengers returned to Saul. They reported what Michal said. Saul was not satisfied. Saul was filled with rage. Saul sent the messengers back to the house. Saul said, "Bring him up to me in the bed." Saul commanded, "I will kill him myself." The messengers returned to David's house. They went inside the bedroom. They looked at the bed. Michal had placed an idol in the bed. This idol was called a teraphim. She had covered the idol with clothes. She placed goat's hair at the head. It looked like David sick in bed. The messengers realized they were tricked. They returned to Saul with the news. Saul was extremely angry with his daughter, Michal. Saul said to Michal, "Why did you trick me?" Saul asked, "Why did you let my enemy escape?" Michal quickly gave an excuse. Michal lied to protect her husband. Michal said to Saul, "David threatened me." Michal claimed, "He said, 'Let me go, or I will kill you.'" This lie satisfied Saul for a moment. David fled far away. David went to Samuel at Ramah. David told Samuel everything that Saul had done. David and Samuel went to Naioth. They stayed together there. Someone told Saul that David was in Naioth. Saul was determined to capture David. Saul sent messengers to Naioth to capture David. The messengers arrived at the location. They saw a company of prophets. The prophets were prophesying loudly. Samuel was standing there leading them. The Spirit of God came upon Saul's messengers. They also began to prophesy. They forgot their mission. Saul heard that his messengers were prophesying. Saul sent a second group of messengers. The second group also arrived at Naioth. The Spirit of God came upon them too. They also began to prophesy. Saul sent a third group of messengers. The third group also began to prophesy. Saul was incredibly frustrated. Saul decided to go himself to Naioth. He traveled toward Ramah. Saul stopped at the great well of Seku. Saul asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" Someone told Saul they were at Naioth in Ramah. Saul traveled onward toward Naioth. As Saul walked, the Spirit of God came upon him. The Spirit was very strong. Saul began to prophesy also. He prophesied all the way to Naioth. When he arrived, he removed his clothes. He lay down naked on the ground. He lay there prophesying all that day. He lay there prophesying all that night. He was completely humbled by the Spirit. The people who saw this were amazed. They remembered an old saying. They said, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" David remained safe with Samuel in Naioth. Saul could not touch David there. David left Naioth in Ramah. He went to find Jonathan. David was full of fear and confusion. He asked Jonathan a question. David said, "What have I done wrong?" David asked, "What is my sin before your father?" David said, "Why does Saul want to kill me?" Jonathan was shocked by David's fear. Jonathan answered, "No, you will not die." Jonathan said, My father tells me everything." He said, "He does not hide small things from me." Jonathan asked, "Why would he hide this plan to kill you?" Jonathan was sure David was safe, but David insisted the danger was real. David said, "Your father knows you love me." He said, "He thinks Jonathan must not know this." David swore an oath. He said, "The Lord lives. I swear it is true." David said, "There is only one step between me and death." Jonathan loved David greatly. He wanted to help his friend. Jonathan said, "Tell me what you wish." He promised, "I will do whatever you ask for you." David explained his plan to Jonathan. David said, "Tomorrow is the new moon festival." David explained, "I should sit and eat with the king." He asked, "Please let me hide in the field until the evening of the third day." He said, "Hide near the stone easel." David described the secret signal. David said, "You will come out on the third day." He said, "You will shoot 3 arrows near the stone." Then Jonathan would send his boy to find the arrows. David explained the first part of the signal. David said, "If you say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows are on this side of you,' then I am safe." He said, "I can come out because I am safe." David promised, "Nothing is wrong." David explained the second dangerous part of the signal. David said, "But if you say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows are beyond you,' then I must run away." He said, "The Lord sends me away. I must flee immediately." David made a final request. He said, "Let the Lord be between you and me forever." They made a covenant. They swore loyalty to each other before the Lord. They promised friendship to their future families. David went and hid in the field. The new moon festival began. Saul sat down to eat the meal. He sat in his usual seat by the wall. Jonathan sat opposite him. Abner sat next to Saul. David's seat was empty. Saul did not say anything on the first day. Saul thought David was unclean. He thought perhaps something happened to make him unclean. The next day was the second day of the month. David's seat was empty again. Saul grew suspicious. Saul asked Jonathan a question. Saul said, "Why did the son of Jesse not come to the meal yesterday and today?" Jonathan had a ready answer. Jonathan replied, "David asked me for permission." He said, "He needed to go to Bethlehem." Jonathan explained David's reason. Jonathan said, "My family has a yearly sacrifice there." He quoted David, "My older brother commanded me to be there." Jonathan repeated David's words, "If I have your favor, please let me go and see my brothers." Saul became furiously angry with Jonathan. Saul shouted at his son. Saul said, "You son of a rebellious woman." Saul insulted Jonathan and his mother. Saul said, "I know that you love the son of Jesse." He shouted, "This brings shame to you." Saul warned Jonathan about his future. Saul said, "As long as David lives on the earth, you will not be safe." He threatened, "Your kingdom will not be safe." Saul gave a command. Saul said, "Send men now and bring David to me." Saul commanded, "He must die." Jonathan stood up for his friend. Jonathan asked his father, "Why must he die?" Jonathan asked, "What has David done wrong?" Saul grabbed his spear immediately. He threw the spear at Jonathan. Saul intended to strike his own son. Jonathan quickly knew his father truly planned to kill David. Jonathan rose from the table. He was filled with fierce anger. He ate no food that second day of the festival. Jonathan was sad for David. He was sad because his father had deeply shamed him. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field. He went to the place where he and David agreed to meet. He took a small boy with him. Jonathan took his bow and arrows. Jonathan told the boy to run. Jonathan said, "Run and find the arrows that I shoot." The boy ran ahead into the field. Jonathan shot an arrow far away. He shot the arrow beyond the boy. This was the agreed signal of danger. Jonathan shouted to the boy. Jonathan said, "Is the arrow not beyond you?" He yelled, "Hurry! Go quickly! Do not stop!" The boy gathered the arrows. He brought them back to his master. The boy did not understand the signal's meaning. Only Jonathan and David knew the truth. Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy. Jonathan said, "Go, carry these back to the city." The boy walked away with the weapons. David quickly came out from his hiding place. He came from the south side of the stone Ezel. David bowed low to Jonathan. His face touched the ground 3 times. They kissed each other. They wept together in sadness. David wept the most heavily. Jonathan spoke to comfort his friend. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace." He reminded David of their promise. Jonathan said, "We promised loyalty to each other in the name of the Lord." He repeated their vow. "The Lord is between me and you." Jonathan said, "The Lord is between my children and your children forever." David stood up. He left the area immediately. He went on his way, fleeing from Saul. Jonathan returned to the city of Gibeah. David was now alone and hunted. David needed to go far away. He was running from King Saul. David went to the city of Nob. Nob was where the priests served the Lord. David went to Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech was afraid when he saw David. Ahimelech asked David, "Why are you alone?" Ahimelech asked, "Why is no one with you?" David did not tell the truth. David lied to the priest. David said, "The king sent me on a secret mission." David said, "The king told me, no one must know about this mission." David said, "I told my young men to meet me in a specific place." David was very hungry. David said to Ahimelech, "Please give me 5 loaves of bread." David said, "Give me whatever food you have." Ahimelech answered David, "I do not have common bread." Ahimelech said, "I only have holy bread." This holy bread was the bread of the presence. Ahimelech said, "I can give you the holy bread if your young men have kept themselves pure." Ahimelech meant they must be ritually clean. David answered the priest. David said, "We have kept ourselves clean." David said, "We always keep ourselves pure, even on common trips." David said, "This journey is holy." The priest gave David the holy bread. They had just taken the holy bread from the table of the Lord. They put fresh, warm bread there instead. A man was standing there that day. He was waiting before the Lord. The man's name was Doeg. Doeg was an Edomite. Doeg was the chief shepherd for King Saul. Doeg saw David receive the holy bread. David needed a weapon. David asked Ahimelech, "Do you have a spear or a sword here?" David said, "I left my sword and my weapons at home." David said, "The king's mission was urgent." Ahimelech answered, "I do not have your usual weapons." Ahimelech said, "But I have the sword of Goliath, the Philistine." Ahimelech said, "You killed him in the valley of Elah." Ahimelech said, "The sword is wrapped in a cloth." Ahimelech said, "It is behind the ephod." David was pleased. David said, "There is no sword like it." David said, "Give it to me." David took the sword of Goliath. David knew he was not safe in Nob. He feared that the Doeg would tell Saul. David fled from Saul. David ran away to the city of Gath. Gath was a city of the Philistines. The king of Gath was King Achish. The servants of Achish saw David. The servants recognized David. The servants said to King Achish, "Is this not David, the king of the land?" The servants remembered the songs about David. The servants said, "Is this not the man they sing about when they dance?" The servants said, "They sang, 'Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed tens of thousands.'" David heard the servants speaking. David knew they understood who he was. David became very afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. David knew he was in great danger. He was in the city of his enemies. He knew they might kill him. David needed to change the king's mind. David changed his behavior in front of them. David pretended to be insane. He acted like a madman. David scratched marks on the doors of the gate. He let saliva run down his beard. He behaved wildly. King Achish saw David. King Achish spoke to his servants. Achish said, "Look at this man. He is clearly mad." Achish asked, "Why did you bring him to me?" Achish asked, "Do I have a shortage of mad men?" Achish said, "I do not want this man in my house." Achish said, "Take him away from here." David escaped from Gath because of his behavior. David left the Philistine city. He escaped from Achish. David fled again to a safer place. David went to the cave of Adullam. The cave of Adullam was a fortress. David's brothers heard he was there. David's whole family heard he was hiding there. They went down to the cave to meet him. They joined David. Many other men came to David. These men were in trouble. These men were in debt. These men were discontented with their lives. These men gathered around David. David became their captain. David became their leader. There were about 400 men with David. David did not stay long in the cave of Adullam. He felt he needed an even safer place for his family. David decided to go to Moab. He wanted to protect his parents. David said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and mother stay with you." David said, "Let them stay until I know what God will do for me." David took his parents to the king of Moab. The king of Moab agreed to help David's parents. David's parents stayed with the king of Moab the whole time David was hiding. Then the prophet Gad came to David. The prophet Gad spoke to David. Gad said, "Do not stay in the fortress." Gad said, "Go back to the land of Judah." David listened to the prophet. David left the safe place in Moab. David went back toward Judah. He came to the forest of Hereth. He and his men stayed in the forest. King Saul was in Gibeah. Saul knew that David was hiding. Saul was sitting under a tamarisk tree. He was sitting on the hill. Saul had his spear in his hand. All his servants were standing around him. Saul spoke angrily to his servants. Saul said, "Listen now, men of Benjamin." Saul asked, "Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards?" Saul asked, "Will he make all of you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds?" Saul was trying to turn his men against David. Saul said, "You all conspire against me." Saul said, "No one told me when my son made an alliance with the son of Jesse." Saul said, "No one feels sorry for me." Saul said, "My own son has caused my servant to lie in wait for me." The men stood silently. None of the servants answered the king. Then Doeg the Edomite spoke. Doeg was standing among the servants of Saul. Doeg said, "I saw the son of Jesse." Doeg said, "He came to Nob." Doeg said, "He came to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub." Doeg described the help David received. Doeg said, "Ahimelech asked the Lord for guidance for David." Doeg said, "Ahimelech also gave food to David." Doeg said, "Ahimelech gave David the sword of Goliath, the Philistine." King Saul was furious. Saul sent a message to the priest Ahimelech. Saul commanded, "Bring Ahimelech, the priest, to me." Saul also commanded, "Bring the whole family of his father." Saul commanded, "Bring all the priests in Nob." Ahimelech and all the priests came to King Saul. Saul spoke to Ahimelech. Saul asked, "Listen now, son of Ahitub." Ahimelech answered, "Here I am, my lord." Saul asked him, "Why did you conspire against me?" Saul said, "You conspired against me with the son of Jesse." Saul said, "You gave him bread and a sword." Saul said, "You asked God for guidance for him." Saul said, "You helped him rise up against me." Saul said, "Now he lies in wait for my life." Ahimelech tried to defend himself. Ahimelech answered Saul, "Who among all your servants is as loyal as David?" Ahimelech said, "David is the king's son-in-law." Ahimelech said, "David is the commander of your bodyguards." Ahimelech said, "David is honored in your house." Ahimelech said, "This was not the first time I asked God for guidance for him." Ahimelech said, "I did not know about any evil plan." Ahimelech said, "Let the king not blame me, his servant, or my family." Ahimelech said, "I knew nothing about this matter, small or great." King Saul did not believe Ahimelech. Saul swore an oath. Saul said, "You will surely die, Ahimelech." Saul said, "You will die, you and all your father's family." Saul commanded his bodyguards. Saul said to the guards, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord." Saul said, "They helped David." Saul said, "They knew David was fleeing, but they did not tell me." The bodyguards refused to obey the king. The king's men did not want to lift their hands. They refused to strike the priests of the Lord. Then Saul commanded Doeg the Edomite. Saul said to Doeg, "You turn and strike the priests." Doeg the Edomite stepped forward. Doeg struck the priests. Doeg killed 85 men that day. They were all priests who wore the linen ephod. Saul also commanded an attack on Nob, the city of the priests. Saul ordered them to kill the people of Nob with the sword. They killed men and women. They killed children and infants. They killed oxen, donkeys, and sheep. They destroyed the whole city. One son of Ahimelech escaped the massacre. His name was Abiathar. Abiathar fled to David. He brought the news to David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. David was very sad. David said to Abiathar, "I knew it that day." David said, "When Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would surely tell Saul." David said, "I am responsible for the death of all your family." David offered Abiathar protection. David said, "Stay with me." David said, "Do not be afraid." David said, "The man who seeks your life also seeks my life." David said, "You will be safe with me." People brought news to David. They said that the Philistines were fighting against Keilah. The Philistines were taking the grain from the threshing floors. David asked the Lord what he should do. David said, "Should I go and attack these Philistines?" The Lord answered David. The Lord said, "Go and attack the Philistines." The Lord said, "You must save Keilah." David's men spoke to him. They were afraid. They said, "Look, we are afraid even here in Judah." They said, "If we go to Keilah, we will fight the Philistine army." They worried they would be killed. David asked the Lord a second time. The Lord answered David again. The Lord said, "Arise, go down to Keilah." The Lord said, "I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hand." David and his men went to Keilah. Abiathar the priest was with them. Abiathar had brought the ephod with him. David fought the Philistines. David killed many of them. David took their livestock. David saved the people who lived in Keilah. People told Saul that David had entered Keilah. Saul said, "God has delivered David into my hand." Saul thought, "David has shut himself in a walled city." Saul gathered all his army. Saul planned to go down to Keilah. Saul wanted to surround David and his men. David knew that Saul was planning evil against him. David spoke to Abiathar the priest. David said, "Bring the ephod here." David prayed to the Lord. David said, "O Lord, God of Israel, your servant has heard a report." David said, "Saul plans to come to Keilah to destroy the city because of me." David asked, "Will the leaders of Keilah deliver me into Saul's hand?" David asked, "Will Saul come down, as your servant has heard?" David asked, "O Lord, God of Israel, please tell your servant." The Lord answered David. The Lord said, "He will come down. Saul will attack." David asked again, "Will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul?" The Lord answered. The Lord said, "They will deliver you." The men of Keilah would betray David. David commanded his men. David and his men left Keilah quickly. There were about 600 men. They left the city and went wherever they could go. People told Saul that David had escaped from Keilah. Saul stopped his march. Saul did not go to the city. David stayed in the wilderness. He stayed in the strong places. David stayed in the hill country of the wilderness of Ziph. Saul searched for David every day. But God did not deliver David into Saul's hand. David was very afraid, because Saul continued to look for his life. Jonathan, Saul's son, went to David. Jonathan found David in the forest. Jonathan helped David trust God. Jonathan said to David, "Do not fear." Jonathan said, "The hand of Saul, my father, shall not find you." Jonathan said, "You shall be king over Israel." Jonathan said, "I shall be next to you." Jonathan said, "Even my father Saul knows this." The two men made a covenant before the Lord. David stayed in the forest. Jonathan went back to his own house. The Ziphites came up to Saul at Gibeah. They said, "David is hiding with us." They said, "He is in the strongholds in the forest." They said, "He is in the hill of Hachilah, which is south of Jeshimon." The Ziphites said to Saul, "Now, O king, come down when your soul desires to come down." The Ziphites said, "It will be our duty to deliver David into the king's hand." Saul was pleased. Saul said, "May you be blessed by the Lord." Saul said, "You have shown compassion on me." Saul said, "Go and make sure of David's hiding place." Saul said, "See where his steps are, and who has seen him there." Saul said, "I am told that David acts very craftily." Saul said, "See all the hiding places where David hides." Saul said, "Then come back to me with the certain news." Saul said, "I will go with you." Saul said, "If David is in the land, I will search him out among all the thousands of Judah." The Ziphites went ahead of Saul to Ziph. David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon. They were in the plain south of Jeshimon. Saul and his men went out to search for David. David heard this news. David went down to the rock. David stayed in the wilderness of Maon. Saul heard that David went to the wilderness of Maon. Saul followed David there. Saul went on one side of the mountain. David and his men went on the other side of the mountain. David hurried to get away from Saul. Saul and his men were surrounding David and his men to capture them. A messenger came quickly to Saul. The messenger said, "Hurry and come." The messenger said, "The Philistines have made a raid upon the land." Saul stopped chasing David. Saul went to meet the Philistines. For this reason, they called that place the Rock of Escape. David went up from there. David stayed in the strongholds of En-Gedi. Saul returned from following the Philistines. Someone told him about David. They said, "Look, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi." Saul took 3,000 chosen men. These men were the best soldiers from all Israel. Saul went to find David and his men. Saul went toward the rocks of the wild goats. Saul came to the sheepfolds by the road. A cave was there. Saul went into the cave to rest. He went inside to cover his feet. David and his men were hiding deep inside the cave. David's men spoke to him. They said, "Look, this is the day." They said, "The Lord spoke to you about this day." They said, "He said, I will give your enemy into your hand." They said, "You may do to him what seems good to you." David stood up slowly. David crept quietly. He came near Saul. David cut off the corner of Saul's robe. Saul did not know David was there. After David cut the cloth, his conscience bothered him greatly. David felt very guilty. David spoke to his men. David said, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing." David said, "I must not lift my hand against my lord Saul." David said, "Saul is the Lord's anointed one." David kept his men from attacking Saul. David used these words to restrain them. David did not allow them to rise against Saul. Saul left the cave. Saul went on his way. David stood up immediately. David left the cave after Saul. David shouted after Saul. David said, "My lord, the king." Saul looked behind him. David bowed with his face to the ground. David showed deep respect. David spoke to Saul. David said, "Why do you listen to the words of men?" David said, "They say, 'David seeks to harm you.'" David said, "Today your eyes have seen the truth." David said, "The Lord delivered you into my hand in the cave." David said, "Some men told me to kill you." David said, "But I did not kill you." David said, "I spared you." David said, "I said, I will not lift my hand against my Lord." David said, "He is the Lord's anointed one." David showed Saul the proof. David said, "Look at the corner of your robe in my hand." David said, "I cut off the corner of your robe." David said, "But I did not kill you." David said, "Know and see that there is no evil in my hand." David said, "I have not sinned against you." David said, "Yet you hunt my life to take it away." David felt this was a great injustice. David said, "May the Lord judge between me and you." David said, "May the Lord avenge me on you." David said, "But my hand shall not be against you." David said, "My hand will not hurt you." David used an old proverb. David said, "Wickedness comes from the wicked." David said, "So my hand will not be against you." David asked Saul a question. David said, "After whom has the king of Israel come out?" David said, "Whom are you pursuing?" David said, "A dead dog? A single flea?" David said, "The Lord will be the judge." David said, "He will judge between me and you." David said, "He will see and plead my cause." David said, "He will deliver me out of your hand." When David finished speaking these words, Saul wept. Saul lifted up his voice and cried. Saul was deeply moved by David's actions. Saul recognized David's voice. Saul said to David, "Is this "Your voice, my son David." Saul said, "You are more righteous than I am." Saul said, "You have treated me well." Saul said, "I have treated you evil." Saul said, "Today you have shown how good you are to me." Saul said, "The Lord delivered me into your hand." Saul said, "But you did not kill me." Saul said, "You let me go." Saul compared David to a faithful person. Saul said, "If a man finds his enemy, does he let him go away safe?" Saul said, "May the Lord reward you with good." Saul prayed for David. Saul prayed for what David did for him that day. Saul stated a realization. Saul said, "Now I know that you shall surely be king." Saul said, "The kingdom of Israel will be established in your hand." Saul asked David for a promise. Saul said, "Swear to me now by the Lord." Saul said, "Promise that you will not cut off my descendants after me." Saul did not want his family line destroyed. Saul said, "Promise that you will not destroy my name from my father's house." David swore to Saul. David agreed to the promise. Saul went home from the wilderness. Saul returned to Gibeah. David and his men went up to the stronghold. David did not fully trust Saul. David remained hidden in the fortified place. End of 1 Samuel 24. After this time, Samuel died. All the Israelites gathered together. They mourned for Samuel. They buried Samuel at his house in Ramah. Ramah was his city. David moved away from there. David went down to the wilderness of Paran. There was a man in Maon. His possessions were in Carmel. The man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep. He had 1,000 goats. He was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The man's name was Nabal. The name Nabal means fool. His wife's name was Abigail. The woman was very intelligent. She was beautiful in form, but the man Nabal was harsh. He was evil in his dealings. He was a Calebite. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. David sent 10 young men. David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel." David said, "Go to Nabal and greet him in my name." David told them what to say. David said, "Say this to Nabal, 'Peace be to you.'" David said, "Say, 'Peace be to your house.'" David said, "Say, 'Peace be to all that you have.'" David gave them a message of remembrance. David said, "I have heard that you have shearers." David said, "Your shepherds were with us in the wilderness." David said, "We did not hurt them." David said, "They did not miss anything all the time they were in Carmel." David instructed them to be kind. David said, "Ask your young men, and they will tell you." David said, "Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes." David said, "We come on a feast day." David said, "Give whatever you find ready to your servants." David said, "Give something to your son David." David's young men went. They spoke to Nabal according to all these words. They spoke in David's name. Then they waited for a response. Nabal answered David's servants. Nabal was very rude. Nabal said, "Who is David?" Nabal said, "Who is the son of Jesse?" Nabal was dismissive. Nabal said, "There are many servants nowadays." Nabal said, "They are breaking away from their masters." Nabal questioned David's authority. Nabal said, "Shall I take my bread and my water?" Nabal said, "Shall I take my meat that I have killed for my shearers?" Nabal said, "Shall I give it to men who come from I do not know where?" Nabal refused to help David. Nabal was selfish. David's young men turned back. They went and returned to David. They told David all these words. David became very angry. David said to his men, Every man put on his sword. Every man put on his sword. David also put on his sword. About 400 men went up behind David. 200 men stayed with the supplies. David planned to retaliate against Nabal's insult. One of the young men told Nabal's wife, Abigail. He told her about the words spoken by David's messengers. He said, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master." But Nabal insulted them harshly. "These men were very good to us. They did not harm us. We never missed anything while we walked with them. This happened when we were in the fields. They were a wall of protection for us. They protected us both, night and day. They protected us the whole time we kept the sheep near them. Now, you must know this. You must consider what you should do. Evil is certainly planned against our master Nabal. Evil is planned against all his household. Nabal is a worthless man. He is so bad that no one can speak to him." Abigail listened to the young man. She hurried very quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread. She took 2 large containers of wine. She took 5 sheep already cooked. She took 5 measures of roasted grain. She took 100 clusters of raisins. She took 200 cakes of figs. She loaded all this food onto donkeys. She then said to her servants, "Go on before me. I will follow behind you." But Abigail did not tell her husband Nabal what she was doing. David and his men were marching quickly. David was planning violence. He said in his heart, "I guarded this man's property for nothing. I watched everything Nabal owned in the wilderness. Nothing belonging to him was lost. But Nabal has returned evil to me for my good deeds. May God punish me severely. I swear that by morning light, I will not leave alive one man belonging to Nabal." Abigail rode on her donkey. She came down a hidden path on the side of the hill. David and his men were coming down the path opposite her. Then Abigail met David and his army. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey. She immediately bowed down before David on her face. She bowed herself low to the ground. She fell at David's feet. She begged him. She said, "My lord, let the guilt be only upon me. Please let your servant speak in your ears. Please listen to the words of your servant. My lord, please do not focus on this worthless man Nabal. He is truly foolish. His name is Fool, and foolishness is truly with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men you sent." Abigail continued speaking, "Now, my lord, the Lord lives. As surely as your soul lives, the Lord has kept you from spilling blood. The Lord has kept you from taking revenge with your own hand. Now let all your enemies be like Nabal. Let all those who seek evil against my Lord be foolish like Nabal. Now, see this gift," she said. "Your servant has brought this present to my Lord. Give this food to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the offense of your servant. The Lord will surely establish a lasting royal house for my Lord. This is because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord. No evil shall be found in you all your days." Abigail spoke about David's future. "If any man rises up to pursue you," she said, "if anyone seeks your life," she continued, "the life of my Lord will be protected. It will be safe with the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies, God will throw them out like stones from a sling, when the Lord has done all the good things he promised. For my Lord, when the Lord has appointed you ruler over Israel," she said, "then you will have no reason for sorrow. You will have no trouble in your heart. You will not regret that you shed blood without reason. You will not regret that you took revenge with your own hand. When the Lord shows kindness to my Lord, please remember your servant." David spoke to Abigail. He was deeply moved by her words. David said to Abigail, "Blessed is the Lord, the God of Israel. He sent you this day to meet me. Blessed is your good judgment. Blessed are you, Abigail. You have kept me this day from shedding blood. You stopped me from taking revenge with my own hand. For truly, the Lord, the God of Israel, lives. He kept me from hurting you. If you had not hurried quickly to meet me, surely Nabal would have no male left alive by morning light." David then accepted the gifts Abigail brought him. He took the food from her hand. David said to her, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I have listened to your voice. I have respected your words." Abigail came back to Nabal. Nabal was at home. He was holding a great feast in his house. The feast was like the feast of a king. Nabal's heart was merry. He was very drunk. So Abigail told him nothing at all. She did not speak to him until the next morning. In the morning, Nabal was sober. The wine had left him. His wife Abigail told him all these things. She told him about David's army. She told him about David's anger. She told him about David's plan to kill him. Nabal's heart died within him. He became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and Nabal died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he was thankful. David said, "Blessed be the Lord. He has judged the cause of Nabal's insult. He has kept his servant from doing evil. The Lord has returned the evil of Nabal upon his own head." David sent messengers to Abigail. He sent them to ask her to become his wife. The servants came to Abigail at Carmel. They spoke to her. They said, "David has sent us to you. He wants to take you as his wife." Abigail rose quickly. She bowed down on her face to the ground. She said, "Here is your servant. I am ready to be a servant. I will wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." Abigail hurried and rose up. She rode upon a donkey. 5 of her female servants went with her. She followed the messengers of David. She became David's wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel. Both Ahinoam and Abigail were David's wives. But Saul had given David's first wife, Michal, to Palti. Palti was the son of Laish. Palti was from Galim. The Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah. They told Saul, "David is hiding. He is on the hill of Hachilah. This place is before Jeshimon." Saul rose up. He went down to the wilderness of Ziph. Saul took 3,000 chosen men of Israel. Saul searched for David in the wilderness of Ziph. David sent out spies. He knew that Saul had truly come. David went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw the place where Saul lay sleeping. Abner, the son of Ner, was there. Abner was the commander of Saul's army. Saul was sleeping in the middle of the camp. The people camped around Saul. David spoke to Ahimelech the Hittite. He spoke to Abishai, the brother of Joab. Abishai was the son of Zeruiah. David asked, "Who will go down with me to Saul in the camp?" Abishai answered, "I will go down with you." David and Abishai came to the people by night. Saul was lying asleep inside the camp. His spear was stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and the people were lying around Saul. They were all sleeping deeply. The Lord had sent a deep sleep upon them. Abishai said to David, "God has given your enemy into your hand this day. Please let me strike him. I will pin him to the earth with one stroke. I will not need a second stroke." David said to Abishai, Do not destroy him. Who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed? That man will be guiltless." David said, "The Lord will strike him, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish." David continued, "The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. Now, take the spear that is at his head. Take the water jar. Let us go." David took the spear and the water jar from Saul's head. They went away quietly. No one saw them. No one knew it. No one woke up. They were all asleep. A deep sleep from the Lord was upon them. David went over to the other side. He stood on the top of the mountain far away. There was a great distance between them. David called to the people and to Abner. He shouted, "Abner, are you not answering?" Abner answered, "Who are you? Why do you call to the king?" David said to Abner, "You are a strong man. Who is like you in Israel? Why have you not guarded your lord the king? A man came in to destroy the king, your lord. What you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die. This is because you have not guarded your lord, the Lord's anointed. Look now where the king's spear is. Look where the water jar is. They were right at his head." Saul knew David's voice. Saul asked, "Is that your voice, my son David?" David said, "It is my voice, my lord, O king." David asked, "Why does my lord pursue his servant? What have I done? What evil is in my hand? Please let the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if men have stirred you up, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have driven me out today. I cannot share in the inheritance of the Lord. They say to me, 'Go, serve other gods. Do not let my blood fall to the earth.' The king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea. He is like one who hunts a bird in the mountains." Saul said, "I have sinned. Return, my son David. I will no longer do you harm. You held my life valuable this day. I have played the fool. I have erred greatly." David answered, "Here is the king's spear. Let one of the young men come over and take it. The Lord rewards every man for doing right. He rewards faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hand today, but I would not stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. I valued your life today. May the Lord value my life. May he deliver me out of all trouble." Saul said to David, "Blessed are you, my son David. You will surely do great things. You will surely succeed." Then David went on his way. Saul returned to his place. David thought to himself, "I will surely perish one day by the hand of Saul. It is better for me to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me in all the borders of Israel. I will escape out of his hand." David rose up. He passed over with the 600 men who were with him. They went to Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. David lived with Achish at Gath. He lived there, he and his men, and their households. David had his 2 wives with him, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the wife of Nabal, the Carmelite. Saul heard that David had fled to Gath. Saul no longer searched for him. David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, let me be given a place in one of the country towns. Let me live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you?" Achish gave David Ziklag that day. Ziklag belongs to the kings of Judah to this day. The number of days that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 full year and 4 months. David and his men went up. They made raids against the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. These people were the inhabitants of the land. They were going toward Shur and to the land of Egypt. David struck the land. He left alive neither man nor woman. He took away the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys, the camels, and the clothing. Then David returned. He came to Achish. Achish asked, "Against whom have you made a raid today?" David said, "Against the Negev of Judah. I raided the area of the Jerahmeelites. I raided the area of the Kenites." David did not leave a man or woman alive to bring news to Gath. David thought, they would tell on us. They would say, "This is what David has done." This was David's behavior all the time he lived in the country of the Philistines. Achish believed David. Achish said, "David has made himself completely hated by his people in Israel. He will be my servant forever." It happened in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies for warfare. They prepared to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, "You know that you shall go out with me to battle. You shall go, you and your men." David said to Achish, "Surely you shall know what your servant can do." Achish said to David, "Therefore I will make you my personal guard forever." Now Samuel had died. All Israel had mourned for him. They had buried him in Ramah, his own city. Saul had put away those who had familiar spirits. He had put away the wizards from the land. The Philistines gathered together. They came and camped at Shunem. Saul gathered all Israel together. They camped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid. His heart trembled greatly. Saul asked the Lord. The Lord did not answer him. He did not answer by dreams. He did not answer by Urim. He did not answer by the prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, "Find me a woman who has a familiar spirit. I want to go to her. I want to inquire of her." His servants said to him, "There is a woman in Endor who has a familiar spirit." Saul disguised himself. He put on other clothes. He took 2 men with him. They came to the woman by night. Saul said, "Please divine for me by the familiar spirit. Bring up for me the person whom I shall name to you." The woman said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done? He has cut off those who have familiar spirits. He cut off the wizards from the land. Why do you lay a trap for my life? You want to cause me to die." Saul swore to her by the Lord. Saul said, "As the Lord lives, no punishment shall happen to you for this thing." Then the woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" Saul said, "Bring up Samuel for me." When the Upwab woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. The woman spoke to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." The king said to her, "Do not be afraid. What do you see?" The woman said to Saul, "I see a god ascending out of the earth." Saul asked her, "What is his appearance?" She said, "An old man comes up. He is covered with a mantle." Saul knew it was Samuel. Saul bowed with his face to the ground. He paid homage. Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me? Why have you brought me up?" Saul answered, "I am in great distress. The Philistines make war against me. God has departed from me. He answers me no more. He does not answer by prophets or by dreams. Therefore I have called you. I want you to tell me what I shall do." Samuel said, "Why do you ask me? The Lord has departed from you. He has become your enemy. The Lord has done to you as he spoke by me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand. He has given it to your neighbor, David. This is because you did not obey the voice of the Lord. You did not execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. Tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground. He was greatly afraid because of the words of Samuel. There was no strength in him. He had eaten no food all that day and all that night. The woman saw Saul lying on the ground. She came to him. She saw that he was greatly afraid. She said to Saul, "Look, your female servant obeyed you. I risked my life for your sake. I listened to the words you spoke to me. Now, please listen to my voice. Let me give you some bread. Eat, so you may have strength. You need strength for your journey." But Saul refused. He said, "I will not eat." His servants and the woman strongly urged him. Saul listened to their voices at last. He rose from the ground. He sat upon the bed. The woman had a fatted calf in the house. She quickly killed the calf. She took flour. She mixed the flour quickly. She baked unleavened bread. She brought the food to Saul and his servants. They ate the meal. Then they rose up and went away that night. The Philistines gathered all their armies. They came together at Aphek. The Israelites camped by the fountain in Jezreel. The Philistine leaders marched by hundreds and by thousands. David and his men marched in the rear with Achish. The leaders of the Philistines saw David. They became angry. The commanders said, "What are these Hebrews doing here?" Achish answered the leaders of the Philistines. He said, "This is David. He is the servant of Saul, the king of Israel. He has been with me for a long time. I have found no fault in him. I have found no fault since the day he came to me." But the Philistine commanders were not satisfied. They spoke against David. They said to Achish, "Send this man back. He must return to the place you appointed for him. He must not go down with us to battle. He may turn against us during the fight. He might try to please his master Saul. He would do this by killing our own men. Is this not David? He is the man they sang about in their dances. They sang, 'Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Achish called David. He spoke to him kindly. He said, "The Lord lives, and I know you are honest. I know you're going out, and coming in with me is good. I have found no evil in you. You are like an angel of God to me. But the lords of the Philistines do not favor you. Now, return. Go in peace. Do nothing to offend the Philistine leaders." David felt great distress. David said to Achish, "But what have I done? What evil have you found in me? I have been your servant until this day. Why can I not fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish answered David again. He said, "I know you are good in my sight, but the commanders have given their order. They said, 'He shall not go up with us into the battle.' Now rise up early in the morning. Rise up with the servants of your master who came with you. Leave as soon as it is light." So David and his men rose up early. They left in the morning. They returned to the land of the Philistines. The Philistines went up to Jezreel to fight Israel. It was the third day. David and his men arrived at Ziklag. The Amalekites had raided the south. They had attacked Ziklag. They burned the city with fire. They took the women captive. They took everyone who was in the city. They took the small and the great. They did not kill anyone. They carried them all away. David and his men came to the city. They saw the city was burned. Their wives and their sons and their daughters were gone. David and the people with him wept loudly. They wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives were taken captive. Ahinoam the Jezreelitess was gone. Abigail, Nabal's wife, was also gone. David was greatly distressed. The people spoke of stoning him. Every man was bitter in his soul. They grieved for their sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. David spoke to Abiathar the priest. Abiathar was the son of Ahimelech. David said, "Please bring the ephod near to me." Abiathar brought the ephod to David. David inquired of the Lord. He asked, "Shall I chase this troop? Will I overtake them?" The Lord answered David. The Lord said, "Pursue them. You will surely overtake them. You will surely rescue everyone." So David went. The 600 men who were with him went too. They came to the brook Besor. 200 men were too tired to cross the brook. They stayed behind there. David continued the chase with 400 men. They found an Egyptian man in the field. They brought him to David. They gave him food, and he ate. They gave him water to drink. They gave him a cake of figs and some raisins. He ate, and his strength returned to him. He had not eaten or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. David asked him, "To whom do you belong? Where are you from?" The young man answered, "I am an Egyptian. I am the servant of an Amalekite. My master left me behind. I became sick 3 days ago. We raided the south of the Cherethites. We raided the territory of Judah. We raided the south of Caleb. We burned Ziklag with fire." David asked him, "Can you lead me to this troop?" The young man said, "Swear to me by God. Promise that you will not kill me. Promise that you will not send me back to my master. Then I will lead you down to this troop." David swore to the young man. He promised he would not kill him. He promised he would not send him back. David's men gave the Egyptian food. They gave him water. They gave him a piece of fig cake. They gave him 2 clusters of raisins. He ate the food. He drank the water. His spirit returned to him. He had not eaten or drunk water for 3 days. The young man led David down to the troop. They saw the Amalekites. The Amalekites were spread out over all the land. They were eating and drinking. They were celebrating a great feast. They were happy because of the great spoil they had taken. They took spoil from the land of the Philistines. They took spoil from the land of Judah. David attacked the Amalekites. He attacked them from twilight that day. He attacked them until the evening of the next day. David killed them all. No man escaped the fighting. Only 400 young men escaped the battle. These men mounted their camels. They fled quickly away. David recovered everything. He recovered all that the Amalekites had taken. David rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing from the spoil. They found the small animals and the great animals. They found the sons and the daughters. They found the spoil they had lost. David brought everything back. David also took all the flocks. David took all the herds. The people drove these animals before the other cattle. They began to say, "This is David's spoil." David came to the brook Besor. he came to the 200 men he had left there. These 200 men were too tired to cross the brook. They were too weak to follow David further. The 200 men came out to meet David. They came out to meet the people who were with him. David came near them. He greeted them kindly. Some evil men spoke up. These men were among those who had gone with David. They were worthless men. They said, "These 200 men did not go with us." They said, "We will not give them any spoil. They can only take their wives and their children. Let them take them and go away." David answered them firmly. David said, "My brothers, you must not do this. You must not do this with what the Lord has given us. The Lord protected us. The Lord delivered the troop that came against us into our hand." David asked, "Who will listen to you in this matter?" "The portion for those who stayed by the baggage must be the same. The portion for those who went down to the battle must be the same. They must share the spoil equally." David made this a law in Israel. This rule remains the custom to this day. David came back to Ziklag. He took some of the spoil. He sent gifts to the elders of Judah. These men were his friends. He sent the gifts to various cities. He said to them, "See, here is a present for you. It is from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord." He sent gifts to the elders in Bethel. He sent gifts to the elders in Ramoth of the south. He sent gifts to the elders in Jatir. He sent gifts to the elders in Aroer. He sent gifts to the elders in Siphmoth. He sent gifts to the elders in Eshtemoa. He sent gifts to the elders in Rachel. He sent gifts to the elders in the cities of the Jerahmeelites. He sent gifts to the elders in the cities of the Kenites. He sent gifts to the elders in Hormah. He sent gifts to the elders in Borashan. He sent gifts to the elders in Athak. He sent gifts to the elders in Hebron. He sent gifts to all the places David and his men used to travel. The Philistines fought against Israel. The men of Israel ran away from the Philistines. Many Israelites died on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines chased Saul and his sons. The Philistines killed Jonathan. They killed Abinadab and Malchishua. The fighting was heavy against Saul. The archers found Saul. The archers wounded Saul very badly. Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Take your sword." Saul said, "Kill me now." Saul was afraid of the Philistines. He did not want the Philistines to torture him. But the armor-bearer did not want to kill the king. The armor-bearer was very afraid. Then Saul took his own sword. He fell on the sword. The armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead. He also fell on his own sword. The armor-bearer died with Saul. So Saul died that day. His 3 sons died. His armor-bearer died. All his men died together. The Israelites across the valley saw the army running away. They saw that Saul and his sons were dead. The Israelites left their cities. They ran away to other places. The Philistines came and lived in the empty cities. The next day, the Philistines came to remove things from the dead bodies. They found Saul and his 3 sons lying dead on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines cut off Saul's head. They took away his armor. They sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines. They wanted the news to reach the temples of their idols. They wanted the news to reach all the people. They put Saul's armor in the temple of Ashtaroth. They fastened Saul's body to the wall of the city Beth-shan. The people of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines did to Saul. All the strong men of Jabesh Gilead walked all night. They took the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Beth-shan. They brought the bodies back to Jabesh. They burned the bodies there. They took the bones. They buried the bones under the tamarisk tree. in Jabesh. Then they fasted for 7 days. 3 days passed. David returned to Ziklag after killing the Amalekites. On the 3rd day, a man came from Saul's camp. The man had torn clothes. He had dust on his head. He came to David. He fell to the ground to show respect. David asked him, "Where do you come from?" The man answered David, "I escaped from the camp of Israel." David asked him, "What happened?" David said, "Please tell me." The man answered, "The people ran away from the battle." The man said, "Many people died." The man said, "Saul and Jonathan, his son, are also dead." David said to the young man, "How do you know that Saul and Jonathan are dead?" The young man said, "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa." He saw Saul leaning on his spear. The chariots and horsemen were close to Saul. Saul looked behind him. He saw the young man. Saul called to him. The young man said, "Here I am." Saul asked him, "Who are you?" The young man answered, "I am an Amalekite." Saul said to the Amalekite, "Please stand over me." Saul said, "Kill me now." Saul said, "Great pain has seized me." Saul said, "My life is still fully in me." The Amalekite said, "I stood over him." The Amalekite said, "I knew he could not live after he fell." So the Amalekite killed Saul. The Amalekite took the crown from Saul's head. The Amalekite took the armlet from Saul's arm. The Amalekite brought them to David. When David heard the news, he took hold of his clothes. He tore his clothes loudly. All the men who were with David tore their clothes too. They mourned. They wept. They fasted until evening. They mourned for Saul. They mourned for Jonathan, Saul's son. They mourned for the army of the Lord. They mourned for the people of Israel. They had died by the sword. David said to the young man who brought the news, "Where do you come from?" The young man said, "I am the son of a foreigner." The young man said, "I am an Amalekite." David asked him, "Why were you not afraid?" David asked, "Why did you stretch out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" David called one of his young men. David said, "Come near." David said, "Strike him down." The young man struck the Amalekite. The Amalekite died instantly. David said to the dead man, "Your blood is on your own head." David said, "Your own mouth testified against you." David said, "You said, 'I have killed the Lord's anointed.'" David sang a sad song about Saul and Jonathan. He commanded the people of Judah to learn this sad song. It is the song of the bow. It is written in the book of Jashar. David sang, "O Israel, your glory is killed on your high places. How the mighty heroes have fallen. Do not tell the news in Gath. Do not announce it in the streets of Ashkelon. Do not let the Philistine women rejoice. Do not let the daughters of the uncircumcised be happy. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew on you. Let there be no rain on you. Let there be no fields of offerings. There the shields of the mighty were thrown away. The shield of Saul was not anointed with oil anymore. The bow of Jonathan never came back empty. The sword of Saul never came back without blood. Saul and Jonathan were lovely and pleasant in their lives. They were not separated in their death. They were faster than eagles. They were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul. He dressed you in scarlet with beautiful things. He put ornaments of gold on your clothing. how the mighty heroes have fallen in the middle of the battle. Jonathan lies dead on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You were very pleasant to me. Your love for me was wonderful. It was more wonderful than the love of women. How the mighty heroes have fallen. The weapons of war are destroyed. David asked the Lord, "Should I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" The Lord said to him, "Go up." David asked, "Where should I go?" The Lord said, "To Hebron." David went up there. He took his 2 wives with him. His wives were Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail, the widow of Nabal. David also brought the men who were with him. Each man brought his family. They lived in the towns near Hebron. The men of Judah came to Hebron. They anointed David as king over the house of Judah. David heard that the people of Jabesh Gilead buried Saul. David sent messengers to them. David said to the men of Jabesh Gilead, "May the Lord bless you. You showed kindness to your Lord, to Saul. You buried him. Now may the Lord show you kindness and truth. I will also show you goodness, because you did this thing. Now be strong and brave. Saul, your master, is dead. The house of Judah has anointed me as their king. Abner, son of Ner, was the commander of Saul's army. Abner took Ishbosheth, Saul's son. Abner brought Ishbosheth across the Jordan to Mahanaim. Abner made him king over Gilead, and the Asherites, and Jezreel, and Ephraim, and Benjamin, and all Israel. Ishbosheth was 40 years old. When he became king over Israel, he reigned for 2 years. Only the house of Judah followed David. David reigned in Hebron over the house of Judah. He reigned for 7 years and 6 months. Abner and the men of Ishbosheth marched from Mahanaim to Gibeon. Joab, son of Zeruiah, and David's men also went out. They met Abner's men by the pool of Gibeon. The 2 groups sat down. One group sat on one side of the pool. The other group sat on the opposite side. Abner spoke to Joab. "Let the young men stand up," he said. "Let them fight before us." Joab agreed. He said, "Let them stand up." 12 men stood up for Benjamin, for Ishbosheth. 12 men stood up from David's servants. Each man grabbed his opponent's head. Each man thrust his sword into the opponent's side. They all fell down together. They called that place Helkath Hazarim. A very hard battle followed that day. Abner and the men of Israel were beaten by David's men. 3 sons of Zeruiah were there: Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel was fast on his feet. He was like a wild gazelle. Asahel chased Abner. He did not turn right or left from following Abner. Abner looked behind him. "Is that you, Asahel?" he asked. Asahel answered, "It is I." Abner said to him, "Turn aside. Chase one of the young men instead. Take his armor for yourself." But Asahel would not stop. Following Abner, Abner spoke again to Asahel. "Stop following me," Abner said. "Why should I strike you down to the ground? How could I look at your brother Joab later? but Asahel refused to turn away. Abner struck Asahel with the butt end of his spear. The spear went into Asahel's stomach. The spear came out his back. Asahel fell down there and died instantly. Everyone who came to the place where Asahel fell stopped. They stood still. Joab and Abishai chased Abner. The sun went down. As they reached the hill of Ammah, the sons of Benjamin gathered behind Abner. They formed one group. They stood on the top of the hill. Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword consume forever?" He cried, "Do you not know that this fighting will end in sadness? How long will you stop telling your people to stop chasing their brothers?" Joab replied, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, the people would have chased their brothers until morning." Joab blew the trumpet. All the people stopped. They stopped chasing Israel. They fought no more. Abner and his men walked through the valley all that night. They crossed the Jordan River. They arrived at Mahanaim. Joab returned from chasing Israel. He gathered all the people. 19 of David's servants were missing. Asahel was also missing. David's servants had killed 360 men. Of Benjamin and Abner's men, they picked up the body of Asahel. They buried him in his father's tomb in Bethlehem. Joab and his men traveled all night. They arrived in Hebron at sunrise. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David was long. David grew stronger and stronger. The house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His first son was Amnon. His second son was Chileab. His third son was Absalom. His fourth son was Adonijah. His fifth son was Shephatiah. His sixth son was Ithram. These 6 sons were born to David in Hebron. Abner became powerful in the house of Saul. Saul had a concubine named Rizpah. Ishbosheth spoke to Abner. "Why did you go into my father's concubine?" he asked. Abner became very angry at Ishbosheth's words. "Am I a dog's head of Judah?" Abner cried. "I show loyalty today to the house of Saul. I do not give you into the hand of David. Yet you accuse me of a fault with this woman. May God do to me what he wishes?" Abner continued, "I will work hard for David. I will do what the Lord promised to David. I will take the kingdom from the house of Saul. I will establish David's throne over Israel and over Judah." Ishbosheth could not answer Abner a word. He was afraid of Abner. Abner sent messengers to David at Hebron. Abner asked David, "Whose is the land?" Abner said, "Make an agreement with me. Then I will help you bring all Israel to you." David answered, "Good. I will make an agreement with you. But I ask one thing from you. You must not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter. She is my wife." David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son. David said, "Give me my wife Michal. I paid 100 foreskins of the Philistines for her." Ishbosheth sent men to Take Michal from her husband. Michal was married to Palti, son of Laish. Her husband Palti went with her. He followed her, weeping, to Bahurim. Abner told him, "Go back." Palti then went back home. Abner spoke with the elders of Israel. He said, "You have wanted David to be your king. Now do it." The Lord said about David, "I will save my people Israel by the hand of my servant David." Abner also spoke to the tribe of Benjamin. Then Abner went to Hebron to tell David everything. Abner went to David at Hebron with 20 men. David made a feast for Abner and his men. Abner said to David, "I will go now. I will gather all Israel to my lord the king. They will make an agreement with you. You will rule over all they desire." David sent Abner away. Abner left in peace. Soon after, Joab and David's servants returned from a raid. They brought much wealth with them. Abner was no longer with David in Hebron. The servants told Joab, "Abner, the son of Ner, came to the king." The king sent him away. Abner left in peace. Joab went to the king. "What have you done?" Joab demanded. "Abner came to you. Why did you send him away so he could leave?" "You know Abner, son of Ner. He came to deceive you. He came to learn about your movements." Joab left David. He sent messengers after Abner. They brought Abner back from the well of Sirah. David did not know about this. When Abner came back to Hebron, Joab took him aside. Joab led him into the middle of the gate. Joab pretended to speak with him privately. There Joab struck him in the stomach. Abner died because he had killed Joab's brother Asahel. Later, David heard about this. David said, "I and my kingdom are innocent forever before the Lord. We are innocent of the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May this guilt fall on the head of Joab. May it fall on the head of all his father's house. May there always be sickness in Joab's house." David commanded Joab and all the people with him, "Tear your clothes." David said, "Put on sackcloth. Mourn before Abner." King David walked behind the coffin. They buried Abner in Hebron. The king cried loudly at Abner's tomb. All the people cried too. The king sang a funeral song for Abner. Did Abner die the death of a fool? Your hands were not tied. Your feet were not bound in chains. You fell as a man falls before evil men. All the people wept again for Abner. All the people came to David. They urged him to eat food while it was still day. But David swore an oath. "May God punish me severely," David said, "if I taste bread or anything else before the sun goes down." All the people noticed this. The people were pleased. They knew the king had not planned to kill Abner. David said to his servants, "Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? I am weak today, even though I am the anointed king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too hard for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds." When Saul's son Ishbosheth heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he became very weak. All the people of Israel were troubled. Ishbosheth had two men who were captains of raiding bands. Their names were Bana and Rechab. They were brothers. They were the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite. Beeroth was considered part of the tribe of Benjamin. The people of Beeroth had run away to Gittaim. They lived there as foreigners until that day. Saul's son Jonathan had a son who was crippled in his feet. His name was Mephibosheth. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came. From Jezreel, his nurse picked him up and fled quickly, but the nurse hurried too much. Mephibosheth fell down and became crippled. Bana and Rechab, the sons of Rimmon, went to the house of Ishbosheth. It was the heat of the day. Ishbosheth was resting on his bed at noon. They went into the house. They pretended that they wanted to fetch some wheat. Then they went secretly into the inner room. They stabbed Ishbosheth in the stomach. They killed him there. They cut off his head. They took the head, and they escaped. They traveled all night through the Arabah Valley. Bana and his brother Rechab came to Hebron. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to King David. They said to the king, "Look, here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy. He tried to kill you. Today, the Lord has given revenge to our lord the king against Saul and his family." David answered, Rechab and his brother Bana. He said, "As the Lord lives, who has saved me from all trouble, I swear this. A man once told me that Saul was dead. He thought he brought good news. I caught him and killed him in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much worse must it be for wicked men? You killed a righteous man in his own house, on his own bed. Now I will demand his blood from your hands. I will remove you." From the earth, David gave an order to his young men. The young men killed Bana and Rechab. They cut off their hands and their feet. They hung their bodies near the pool in Hebron. They took the head of Ishbosheth. They buried the head in Abner's tomb in Hebron.